tonight. I'm sorry I wasn't here the night that this class was scheduled because unfortunately you'll miss a lot not getting to take a tour of the Warrants office. That always added 20 or 30 more minutes of people having questions that I didn't cover well enough in the little class. But I am the supervisor for both the criminal and the civil warrants division. And I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about that tonight. And I always learned during instructor school that you need to go ahead and start your class off with a little something people can laugh about. So I want to show you a picture of two hard-working deputies trying to serve a warrant. The warrants division, like I said, is made up of two different sections, the criminal warrant section and the civil warrant section. And criminal warrants, as you may already know, are offenses that society has deemed or are in violation of the law, either a misdemeanor or a felony. And you may want to know what they are. Misdemeanors are a violation of the law that are punishable by a fine and or a jail sentence. And that's the important phrase, the jail sentence. It can be up to 11 months and 29 days. It cannot be over that amount of time or it becomes a felony. It can be a combination of one or both, one or the other or both. A felony is a crime punishable by over 1 year incarceration in the penitentiary, a state penitentiary, 1 year or more. It can include a monetary fine, but that's the big dividing line. If it's serious enough to be in jail a year or more, it's a felony. Less than that is a misdemeanor. Criminal warrants, where do they usually come from? In Sumner County, most criminal warrants originate when an offense occurs between two parties, a victim and a perpetrator. And one of the parties or a law enforcement officer who's called to investigate comes to the judicial magistrate's office, which is located in the criminal justice complex there in Gallatin, adjacent to the courts and the jail, and presents his case to the judicial magistrate. One of the gentlemen, I believe it was you, asked me exactly what a judicial magistrate is. Well, in some jurisdictions, they're attorneys, like Nashville. You may have heard them talking about a night court judge. The night court judge is not really a judge, but he is, in Nashville case, a lawyer. In Sumner County, I don't think we have any lawyers or retired lawyers that are judicial magistrates, but they do receive training. They have continuing training, and they're overseen by the General Sessions Court judges as far as their direction on when to issue warrants, when not to, questions of law, and such as that. I was in a class today where I learned that the law is changing, or has changed. I knew that it had changed, and a citizen can't come in and swear out a felony warrant any longer. He has to make a report to a police officer, and the police officer has to swear they have to go in and take the warrant out. I understand now that they're in the works of changing it where misdemeanors would have to be approved by the district attorney's office before a citizen can take the warrant. However, they could go in and relate their information to the criminal justice or the judicial magistrate, and they would issue a criminal subpoena. The criminal subpoena does the same thing. It gets both parties into the court for the judge to hear the complaint. It just doesn't require someone to be arrested and a bond set for them. So it would be similar to a police officer issuing a ticket to be in court. I'm not really sure what all the thinking is behind that. I haven't had time to read on it too much, but I do know it's something that the legislature is in the process or has enacted. It may just not have taken effect yet. Do you know, Chief? Okay. Criminal warrants may also come from a judge, either the Division I or Division II General Sessions Court judge. The criminal division of the circuit court judge's office may also issue warrants, as well as the judicial magistrates that I talked about. We also receive a number of warrants each day from out of county, from neighboring counties in the state, or from out of state. It's not unusual to get a handful of warrants down from Kentucky every day. They come from mostly our bordering counties, because people who break the law in Tennessee tend to run back across into Kentucky and vice versa. So Sheriff Hobson or the sheriff up in Allen County will find out a good address down here and send down some warrants for us to try to serve down here. When the sheriff receives a warrant, we must first stamp the warrant with a received stamp. This is important, and it's state law. The stamp includes the date and the initials of the person receiving it, and it must be done on the day that the paper is received from the courts, or in the case of a paper coming in from somewhere else, the date comes in the mail. There's a penalty, a civil penalty, to the sheriff for every paper that isn't stamped the day it's received. So if a clerk comes down from the courthouse with a stack of papers at quitting time, somebody has to stay and stamp the papers, or there's a possibility that there's a $250 fine for each paper that's not stamped as prescribed by law. And I'm sure the sheriff's not going to pay it all himself, so it's going to come out of our pocket. So there is a little bit of liability there. I've got an example of it. Up in the right-hand corner, you see that red stamp with the blue ink on it. That's every paper, civil, criminal, whatever. They have to be received legally as prescribed, with the person's initial that received it and the date that it's received on in the stamp. It's also a good way to tell a original paper. The original is the only one that gets stamped, not any copies. If you ever happen to see a stamp that's all black, it's probably been copied off the original. It's an old lawyer's trick. You use different color ink, because when you Xerox it or copy it, unless you've got a big budget and a color copier, it's always going to come out black. And so you'll know by looking at the different colored ink that it's the original paper. All do stop me along the way if you think of anything that I'm not clear on. All warrants, when we receive them, are entered into RMS, or our House Records Management System. It may not be entered the day we received it, because, like I said, we might be walking out the door when we get a stack of them in. But the first thing we do is put it in the RMS system. The RMS system is not just our in-house system, but every agency in the county has access to what warrants are in that system. So if Portland stops a car and asks their dispatcher to check him running for wanted, one of the things they're going to do is run him through the county RMS system, and it'll show that he's got a warrant. Now, they can't detain him, they can't arrest him without verifying that warrant is in hand. But they can detain him on that long enough to call the sheriff's office and verify that somebody has gone down and actually seen the warrant, that it is a good and valid warrant and hasn't been served or returned to the court for some reason. All warrants that are marked as arrest papers, and we get a fair number that are marked as cites, as I said, a citation where no bond is required. These papers will be entered into the NCIC system, which is the National Crime Information Center. This includes all felonies and any misdemeanors that have a bond. the dispatchers were explaining to you earlier that there's a large number of papers entered each month at the NCIC. These are arrest papers. We will enter them in if we have the paper in hand, and if the paper is kind of bond. It doesn't matter whether it's a bad check warrant for less than 500. Well, let me change that. For over $500. When you hit the $500 amount in thefts and larcenies and vandalisms and any kind of crime like that, where there's property loss, that usually distinguishes the difference between a misdemeanor theft and felony. So when you hit 501, the magistrate or the judge that's issued the warrant is going to add a bond to it. And we'll enter those into NCIC. I had intended to get those figures up, but somehow or another I didn't get all of them. But we're averaging over a year's time probably about 300 to 350 papers entered each month, with usually somewhere around 30 to 40 papers less than that being cleared by arrest each month. Now, they're not all the same papers, but the more papers we enter each month, the greater our chances are to have a larger clearing rate the next month, because we're always gaining a few papers. We make a large number of transports across the state and across the country to pick up prisoners each year. Usually the sheriff's office will not go themselves if the transport is going to take more than a day to drive to and return from, because we found that it's usually cheaper to hire a security company that transports prisoners. They can do it because of the amount of prisoners they're moving at any one time. They can do it cheaper than we can afford to send a car and one or two officers clear to Oklahoma City and back. But for instance, later this week, we're returning a prisoner to Ohio Penitentiary that's been down here for trial. We arranged to pick up a North Carolina prisoner this morning while I was in class. The company picked them up, and they ought to be back here the next day or two to stand trial for their charges. It's just something that they kind of come in bunches, but we probably average 4 or 5 a week anyway. The in-state pickups, we do a lot more of them. We may average 3 or 4 of those a day. Some days I may come in and have one car going to Knoxville and another car going to Memphis. It just depends on who has picked somebody up. And it can be anywhere from answering a call at the house and running the person for wanted and finding out that they had warrants in Sumner County, to making a traffic stop, or arrested on another charge altogether by an officer on the street. And when they get them into jail, they find out when they're running for wanted that they're wanted. It may be in Sumner County and Wilson County and Smith County. Maybe several counties. It's usually the person that's had it in the longest that gets the call first, and then we just pass them around from one county to another until all the charges are cleared up. We have cleared a lot of arrests in the last 6 to 7 years since this has been implemented, and I think it's through the support of the last couple of sheriffs we've been able to do that, because we didn't start out with that kind of money in our budget to do transports, did we, Chief? We had to add it on and scrape a little from here and steal from Peter to pay Paul, but each year we managed to add a little more to the budget, and we bring more people back to stand justice or stand trial for what they've been accused for doing.
The one that had the longest, who's been out the longest would be where you would send them?
Yeah, if our warrant was taken out in 2010 and Wilson County's warrant was taken out in 2012, ours would have been in NCIC longer, and so our hit would come back. I mean, they may come back with a whole multiple sheet of hits, but ours will show it's been in the system longest, and that's normally on an in-state basis, that's how they handle it. Now, if we get a hit, say in Kentucky, and a person might get picked up in Fayette County, Lexington, Kentucky, and Sumner County wants them and Nashville wants them, but they may have warrants in Bullitt County and Jefferson County and Simpson County, Kentucky. Well, it's only natural you have to extradite somebody into the next state, but locally you don't. You just move him from that jail over to the next jail where there's warrants. So he'll make the trips all around Kentucky to 3 or 4 different jails if he's got warrants in those locations, and stand trial, and sometimes he'll spend several years in the penitentiary in Kentucky before we get a chance to get him. But our hold will stay with him, and they're called detainers. A detainer gets placed on him, and it follows him around, and eventually, whether he signs a interstate agreement for detainers, and that's basically just a interstate commerce compact that, or not a commerce compact, but interstate compact that's been signed between the 50 states that allows one jurisdiction in one state, upon the request of the accused, to be brought back to that state for trial. Even though they're serving time in one state, they can be brought back here for trial. Then they have to be returned to the holding state and finish their time there. And this is usually done because the prisoner thinks he's got a good chance of working a deal out with the court in the state that's wanting to extradite him. Or they may be able to work a deal out, so if he got 3 years in Tennessee for a crime and he's serving 3 years in Kentucky, they'll let him serve both terms at the same time in Kentucky, and he'll finish his time. And that's usually the reason a prisoner asks to do that. But we've got pick up at the first of the month in Mississippi, I believe, where that exact thing has occurred. They've contacted the district attorney's office. The district attorney's agreed that we'll go down and pick that prisoner up from the jail or from the prison in Mississippi and bring him up here for trial. He's got to be tried and adjudicated within 180 days, and then we make arrangements to take him back down to Mississippi, and he may gain some time or he may work out a deal, but that's up to the courts. But, nevertheless, it's warrants served and people arrested and brought to justice for the people of this county. Either way. Did I answer it?
You did.
Okay. Next after the warrants are put into our own systems, our own computer systems, they're assigned to a zone card. Our civil warrants, or I was talking about criminal warrants. Our criminal warrants are divided into 3 zones, and we do that because we have almost an equal number of papers in each zone, where no one officer has a lot more than another in the neighboring zone. Our civil warrants are done the same thing, but we've got enough of them that we've had to divide them into 4 zones. So what you find is our civil papers are done by postal areas because civil papers come between, are mostly, I'm getting ahead of myself, but they're mostly a breach of contract between 2 parties or more. And you've got to have people to enter into agreements or contracts to have these breaches or feel like they're wrong and take a civil paper out. Whereas a criminal paper, you could have one person breaking into houses and hit 3 or 4 houses in one neighborhood in the day, so you can have a lot more papers, not necessarily just because people doing business in a certain area. So the criminal zones are usually around the major towns in the county. Gallatin is one zone by itself. Hendersonville in the southern end of the county is one zone by itself, and then the whole northern end of the county is one zone by itself. But the civil papers, Gallatin, just the city of Gallatin is one zone. Bethpage, Castilian Springs, Cottontown, they're all in other zones because there's enough civil papers generated just with the businesses in Gallatin, and I refer to them as businesses. It could be a marriage, but it's usually because you wanted your house repainted, and this gentleman is in the paint business, and he agreed to do it for a price, and he either didn't do it to your satisfaction, or didn't finish it in a timely manner, or did something that made you believe you shouldn't have to pay him, and made him believe that you ought to pay him. So that's how civil paper comes about. But I apologize, I've gotten ahead a little bit. The warrants will remain in these zones, or the zone car, until they've been served or all leads are exhausted. Or after 3 months, usually the officer has made multiple attempts at the residence. He's sometimes talked to neighbors or relatives and tried other locations that he thinks they may be at, to no avail. So after 3 months, if we haven't made any progress and we don't have any other information, we put them on the wall or into our inactive file. Now, inactive papers don't mean they're not good papers. It just means we're not taking them out the car every day looking for them, actively looking for the paper. Those are the ones that are most likely to get stopped by a police officer because they were speeding, or their registration was run out, or a DUI checkpoint in Nashville one night, or some other reason law enforcement comes in contact with them and runs the name to see if they're wanted. And sure enough, they're in our files as being wanted. And that's a lot of the papers that we're clearing, papers that we haven't been able to find in our own county. They're doing business somewhere else or have moved somewhere else, and they run across the law there, and it's to our benefit that we have them in computers. So that's how the criminal papers are taken care of. Civil papers are taken out by parties feeling that they've been wronged, and I'm going over a little bit of the same thing. I got ahead of myself a minute ago. Party in a contract or an agreement, it could be a rent related, a loan payment, repairs on a vehicle or a house, or appliance, a marriage contract, anything that involves a contract that alleged has been broken or not completed as prescribed in a timely manner. The punishment for this is monetary. There's no jail time unless you are found in contempt of the judge because you didn't carry out an order. But if you owe money, of course, you can't go to jail for owing money in America, not like in Old England where it was debtor prison. Civil warrants are issued by the Civil Section of General Sessions Division 1 Court for matters less than $25,000. You may have heard that called small claims court. Anything over $25,000, the Circuit Court Civil Division handles. The General Sessions Division 1 Court also handles child support or attachment cases, and they're also heard in Division 2, Judge Brown's Court. Chancery Court handles civil papers too, But civil matters in the Chancery Court might be where you're appealing a hearing from a lower court, or where you, if the sheriff decides I've done something wrong, in contrary to department policy, and it's serious enough that I'm terminated. My first chance is to appeal it to the Civil Service Board. If they uphold the sheriff's decision, it stands. My next due process appeal is through the Chancery Court. So if one government agency is suing another one over something, it's going to be heard in Chancery Court. If you're have a relative, if you inherit something and you're challenging the will, or another sibling, say, is challenging that they don't believe that they got their fair share, Chancellor Court would be where that's settled. So we've got about 4 courts here in this county that handle civil cases. All civil papers have to be stamped and received in the same manner as criminal papers, like I showed you with that red stamp in the blue ink. The same penalty applies for them as criminal papers. All civil papers have a time limit. I kind of call it life expectancy. Criminal warrants, as one of the dispatchers told you, after 5 years they're purged from the system if they're misdemeanor. After 5 years, there's less likely that the victim is still around to prosecute. They may have passed away. If it's a business, they may have gone out of business or sold their business to somebody else. The chances of having a good prosecution on a misdemeanor after 5 years is nil. So those papers are returned to the judge, and the judge can decide to keep them in the clerk's office, or he can do what most judges do, and he retires those cases that are that old. But a civil paper, it has a life expectancy. The average civil paper is usually about 60 days, but they could be 30, they could be 90, it depends on what type of paper it is. And that just means from the date they're issued, you have that much time to make a return on that paper. Every original paper has to be returned to the court it came from at some point or another. Civil papers, if it's got a 60-day return, that means we make every attempt we can within 60 days until we find out that he's no longer in our jurisdiction. If we believe that they're trying to avoid us, that might be part of our return. If we just can't find them, if they've moved and we are not able to locate a forwarding, and we don't always get that much cooperation from apartment managers because of their privacy policies in their own apartments. The postmaster has to answer a formal request, but that could take some time. But the postmen are not supposed to tell us, oh yeah, old Joe, he moved into Gallatin. You can check with Gallatin to find out what his new address is. The way we used to find out by waving at the postman on the route and saying, hey, the guy that used to live down here, where's he moved to? They're by law not supposed to tell us about that anymore. It's supposed to go through proper channel. So if we're not able to locate the person or serve them or find out that they're not in our county, then we have to make a return towards the end of the life of that paper to the court so that the court has an answer. If we know where they've moved, we'll include that in there. If not, the return could just be that after 12 attempts at this paper at different times of the day and night, we were unable to locate anybody at that address. We don't know where they've moved to. But every civil paper has to be returned to the court within a certain amount of time. So we don't have an inactive file in civil. One side of our wall is a big bookcase full of pink jackets with warrants in it. The civil side has 6 little boxes, and they're mostly empty. And when people come in, they say, well, you all do a better job with the civil papers. No, we just have to send them back. These we just keep looking for until we find them or until they shrivel up and die. So, does everybody understand the difference between that? Service is made when you give the paper to the defendant, or when the service may simply state that you have made numerous attempts to serve the paper and you are unable to locate the individual in the county. The return is an explanation to the court of what you did with the paper or the process during your attempt to serve. A leading process in civil papers is the first process, the one that gets the whole ball started. It gets it's the means by which the court uses to acquire its jurisdiction over a person or a specific property. It's a means where the court requires the appearance and answering of the defendant and requires the complainant to be there to state his side of the court so that the court can make a ruling. And once they've made a ruling or a judgment, then another civil process might be taken out in order for you to be paid what you owe. The person may not have the money to pay you, so you might obtain an execution. You might levy on real property that he owns, that the sheriff's able to seize and sell. You might put a garnishment on his paycheck if you know where he works. You might put a bank levy on accounts he may have in a bank or savings and loan. Several of those ways are how, but all of that is down the road. The first is always called a leading process, and it's the way you get them into court in the first place. I did come up with these figures from last year, and I think you may have already heard of them from Major Edison, but the total number of criminal warrants we received from January 1st to December 31st of 2014 were 17,266 papers. The total number we served during that period was 16,690 papers. Civil warrants, we received 10,857 papers in that time. You notice we served more than we received. How that happens is there's always papers there. We had papers left over from 2013 that we were able to get served and caught up. So that explains how we served more papers than we got, because we had them the year before. But we're on the way to a little higher year. At this point, 3 months in, we're already at I think last Friday I checked and we had something like 4,000 criminal papers in already, maybe a little over 4, which is ahead of this point last year. And civil usually is right behind them. So I don't know, nobody's asked it yet, but how many people work in the Warrants Division? There's four clerks, and our clerks are deputy clerks. They are sworn in and can make arrests. They don't go out on the street to make arrests, but the people who come and turn themselves in or are brought over from the court to the jail, they usually will go back in the back and fill out the arrest report to do that arrest, as opposed to having to call a police officer in off the street. There's one supervisor. We have 2 part-time paid officers that work with us, and we have 7 full-time officers that work civil and criminal together. There's a total of 14 of us all together, full and part-time. And I'm hoping we're getting to the point pretty soon where the sheriff's going to try to budget in a few more, but we have to show the figures growing every year to need the help. Yes, sir.
Do you attribute the rise in warrants to population or to more activity that warrants a warrant?
I felt like some of the criminal warrants increased because of the economic situation. It seems like we're seeing a little bit of a slowing on that. On the other hand, as the economy is doing a little better, people are doing more business, and you'll see an increase in civil records. At least that's what I've seen over the last few years being implemented. I've got one question for y'all. Anybody here know why the chicken crossed the road?
The surface paper.
It's because he had does this look like our chief deputy chasing the chicken? Jeff made a lot of choices in his years. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I know this was a lot of dry statistics, and I apologize.
When you started the Sumner one, you got with 2 people?
When we do what?
When you started the Sumner one, you always got with 2 deputies?
Not necessarily. If we have any information, if we know this person is usually a runner, if we think we're going to have problems, a lot of times we will get a second deputy, his own car to go with us. We may, if it's inside of town, we'll ask one of the local officers to go with us, just so somebody's there to cover the back door so he doesn't run out on us. But usually our deputies, it's 1 warrant for 1 deputy usually, unless we know there's a problem. If he's got a criminal history where we know he fights police, or he might be armed or make threats, we'll do something differently. Same thing with civil papers. We go do evictions every day with a lone officer, and that may not be the safest thing, but the number of papers we have and the number of people we have, we can't always do like some jurisdictions. Nashville has what they know as the county-wide crew, and there's about 12 or 14 officers and a captain and a sergeant on that crew, and their job is just to do evictions. And if they go into an area where gangs are doing business that they know of, or into a project area or something, they may take the whole squad in to do 1 eviction. Whereas if they don't have any information on it, and it's in a relatively good neighborhood, they may only take 2 or 3 officers with it. And the eviction really is just, it's our job to turn over the property to the rightful owner in a peaceful manner. We don't do the moving, we don't do the heavy lifting. The only thing we do besides going in and making sure that the people that aren't supposed to be in the house are out, and the person that's supposed to have the house is able to change the locks and take possession of it, is we do a search of the house to make sure there's not any valuables. And what I mean by that is money or valuable coins, stocks or bonds or anything of value like that that need to be taken for safekeeping, or any weapons, if there's guns, knives, swords, something like that, or any drugs that need to be seized and destroyed. Other than that, it's the new owner's responsibility to take all valuables that belong to the previous resident out to the edge of the property line and leave it there so that they do not have to come back on the property to collect their valuables. They're not responsible for it, neither is the sheriff's office once this paper's been served, because they've had written notice, the house has been posted, and they've had the right to appear in court to argue their side of the case. So we have to stand by to keep the peace while maybe the bank, maybe the person who was renting the property comes in with his people that he has to hire to move the property out. Now, anything that's not of value, if there's nothing in there but trash, and boxes of papers and beer cans and whatever, they can clean the house out at their own discretion. Anything of any value, if there's a good television, a living room set, clothing, something like that, that has to be carried out to the property line, because once we've done the eviction, the former residents are not allowed to come back on their property. It's posted with a criminal trespassing notice. And if any peace officer finds them on the property after they've been set out, that peace officer can charge them with criminal trespassing.
Does the owner have to protect the property that sits out there?
No.
I mean, what if it rains?
There are no responsibility. It's the responsibility of the owner of the property to have it out before the day of the eviction. If he doesn't, it's his loss if he's not able to get there. We don't allow people to come and start picking up the property while we're on the while we're there. But once we leave, we're not responsible for anything that anybody drives by and picks up that's out on the edge of the street. Because, like I said, they've already had notice that this eviction was going to happen. The officers usually try to sit down with them and find out how soon they can be out of there and tell them that this is going to happen on a certain date. If they don't move it, then the owner will move it, and they could stand to lose it. But there is no responsibility of either the sheriff's office or the owner of the property for that former property residence property once it's said it occurred.
Is there any time when they can give that warrant, whatever, to a person that knows that person, or does it have to be issued to the person?
In most cases, in civil cases, the person that the paper is for is the person we have to make personal service on. There are a few exceptions. I may come to your house with a paper for you and your husband. And your husband may be at work. I can give you your copy of the paper, and I can allow you to call your husband on the phone and let me talk to him and see if it's okay to leave his copy with you. But if he refuses me that right, I still have to serve him personally. I can't leave it with you. I can only serve your paper. If your name's not on the paper, I can't serve you.
Even as an employer of somebody?
You could be the registered agent, or if it's for the owner of a business and that business that owner is out of town and he leaves you in charge and is able to convey that to me, I might be able to leave the paper with you as being the person in charge. But a pretty good rule is whoever's name is on the paper is the person I have to personally give it to, or it's usually not good service.
Have you had any officers to get hurt serving warrant?
No, not this county. There was a Davidson County sheriff killed.
You mean civil wars, right?
Yeah. Serving a civil paper. It was back when we were both in Hendersonville, wasn't it? Or right about that time. It's been a number of years, but he went to a house to do an eviction, and there's a website that anybody can go to. It's called Officer Down, and you can see a small amount of information on officers that are killed it doesn't come out automatically, but usually within a few hours of a death of a police officer in America, it's posted on that site with some of the details. And we've seen several in the last few years, and that's what it amounts to a lot of times. An officer goes to a evict somebody from their home that they've been foreclosed on, and now the bank owns it, or the person he owed the mortgage to owns it, and they're putting him out. It may have been a family home. He may have mortgaged a home for a business venture that didn't work out, or just times got worse and he had to have more money to live on, and he mortgaged the home and lost it. And there's been, I don't know how many, but there's been several police officers across the United States serving civil papers on just that, who were shot and killed when they went there to serve the paper.
When you serve the papers, you have like a photo of what the person's supposed to look like?
Not
their date of
usually.
birth and-
Not usually in civil paper.
and some-
Criminal papers, like the dispatchers talked to you about, most of the criminal papers are entered in NCICD, and most of the papers that go into NCICD, probably about 90% do have a picture with it. But they don't come from the court. They're pictures that we have to get either through driver's licenses or previous booking photos from our jail or another jail in the area that we're able to access their photo bank.
There's a lot of same names, that's why I asked that.
Yeah, it is, but it's kind of it's a common sense type of thing. You use the information the attorney wants to put as much information as he can on the paper because he wants to get his paper served to that person in court. So, if you're not able to serve it because there's not enough information, and when you return it that you didn't have enough information, I'll guarantee you when he reissues the paper, he'll try to get a little more information. Well, I've enjoyed it. All of y'all are welcome to come down anytime you want to, Monday through Friday when we're in the office, and I'll be happy to show you around the Warrants office.